Welcome to video number 7. Always nice to be on a prime number. Today we're going to look at what happens when students divide by 0. Students don't mean to do it, it's all very innocent. If you look online at this point, go on Google and type in divide by 0 memes, you will find loads of images to represent the kind of things that could happen if you could divide by 0. And it's not as blunt as you might think. People aren't writing down in my lessons 2 divided by 0 equals something. They're doing it in a more subtle way than that, and something that can come up on GCSE potentially. So I'm going to start off by just showing you a couple of examples and how to manage those examples. So the first example I'm going to look at is a question like this, a simple quadratic. Hopefully those of you looking at this are going, oh, quadratic, probably got 2 solutions. I can do some tests on it. The mistake that students make is to go, there's y on both sides, I'm going to divide by y to give me y equals 4, and there's my answer. It is right in terms of 4 does work for that equation, but it isn't the only answer, and you haven't fully solved the question. So to tackle this, what I'm going to do instead is solve it by treating it more like a typical quadratic, i.e. making it equal to 0, and then factorising. And now we can see our 2 solutions, the y equals 0 or y equals 4. And then looking back, we can see that actually what we did at the start was to divide by something that turned out could be 0. And that's the problem. We've got to be really careful when we divide by something that is or could potentially be 0. So looking at a slightly harder question that still my students come across, still very much A level. This one is sin x equals to tan x, and students very correctly start off by going, well, I don't like two different trigonometric terms in one equation, so let's convert them. And they say sin x equals to sin x over cos x. Anyone that says sin x gets a very abrupt correction. It's sine. And then they'll do something like times both sides by cosine, and I'm still with them. But then they do the inevitable, which is to divide both sides by sin x. Again, that's going to cause a problem, because sin x can be 0, cos x can be 0. We can't divide by these functions because they could potentially be 0. So to deal with that, we could factorise it like at the start. Or as these questions get harder and longer when you're writing it down, you might want to do something different. So an alternate way of laying this out is to consider a key mathematical word. Consider what happens when sin x equals 0, and then I can say, I can substitute these in, so I get 0 cos x equals 2 times 0, which I do realise is quite trivial. And we can say, so sin x equals 0 is a solution. And once we've considered that, we can then consider that sin x isn't equal to 0. And considering this separately, I now, because sin x isn't 0, I can divide by it. And what I'll end up with is 2 different sets of solutions to this equation. At the end, I'll just put them together and say, so my solutions are, and then list out all the possible solutions. Either way is fine, but what is not okay is to either divide by something which could be 0 and not, and kind of ignore what could happen. Or if you're using this method, it's not also okay to say that sin x equals 0 and then sin x is positive if it can be negative. We need to consider every possible option. And the easiest way of doing it is to say if it's 0 or if it's not 0. And then we know we've covered every possibility there. Okay, so I was looking around for a puzzle because I didn't know any puzzles to set you on this one, and I couldn't find any. All I found on the internet were stupid memes and crazy pictures that people have spent clearly weeks on Photoshop tweaking. So instead I've had to design something while I'm playing around. And I was playing around with the verify function on the calculator, and I was typing something in which I knew it had solutions. In fact, I knew for certain it had 2. And I actually, when I was considering the function, wasn't quite sure whether it had 3. So the function I was solving was this one. Okay, so it turns out I was playing around with quite a few functions, and some of them had nastier solutions than others. So this one turned out okay. Now, for some of you, certainly first year students, might be a little flummoxed by what Ian Lunar. What a great opportunity to research those in preparation for your next year. Certainly those of you who are on one of the FSMQ programs or something like that, this might take quite a bit of research to find out what they are. But essentially ln or ln is a log, and e is just an irrational number that makes that log work particularly nicely. Now, those of you that do know how to solve this or start working through, hopefully you'll find that mathematically when you write it down you get 3 solutions. Great. That's kind of what we expect. We've got a cubic here. However, when you type in one of those 3 solutions into the verify mode on your calculator, it says it's not true. I'm not sure. I'm not trying to start a puzzle and lie to you and lead you on here into going down the wrong alleys. I'm just intrigued as to what you think. So maybe we could start a debate over whether this particular question has got 2 solutions or 3. So good luck finding those. Answers in the comments.